She was just the maid. At least that's what they thought. When a wealthy millionaire invited her to his charity gala, it wasn't out of kindness. It was a cruel joke, an unspoken reminder of where she belonged. But when she walked through those doors, heads turned, and whispers filled the room. No one knew the truth she carried. No one imagined that before the night was over, she would shatter their illusions, expose their hypocrisy, and change the way they saw her forever. What happened inside that ballroom? And why did the most powerful man in the room look terrified the moment she smiled? For 2 years, Maria cleaned the Blackwood estate. Marble floors that gleamed under her hands. Crystal chandeliers she could never afford to touch if she didn't have a rag in her palm. She was invisible, spoken to only when something needed fixing, looked at only when someone wanted to remind her of her place. But Maria had learned to smile through the subtle jabs, the condescending looks, the whispered comments about people like her. She had no reason to believe her life would ever brush against theirs outside of work. That changed the day an envelope arrived, gold-trimmed, sealed in wax, with a handwritten note from the millionaire himself. Inside was an invitation to his most exclusive charity gala. The dress code? Maximum elegance. Maria knew exactly what this was, not an honor, but a setup. What they didn't know was that she'd been preparing for a night like this her whole life. The moment Maria stepped into the Blackwood ballroom, the air changed. The chatter softened, replaced by stifled laughter and sideways glances. She could feel their eyes scanning her from head to toe, measuring, mocking, deciding she didn't belong. Her gown, a deep sapphire that caught the light with every step, should have silenced them. Instead, it seemed to provoke them. Near the grand staircase, Richard Blackwood, the man who signed her paychecks without ever learning her last name, stood with a glass of champagne, his smirk sharp as a blade. He leaned toward a cluster of guests, whispering something that made them all laugh louder. A camera flash went off. Another. Maria realized they weren't just mocking her, they were documenting it. The whispers grew bolder as she passed. Where do you think she rented that? She probably saved for months. Poor thing. Imagine thinking you could blend in here. Maria kept her back straight, each step deliberate. Every muscle in her body told her to turn around, to walk out and spare herself the humiliation. But she had spent years being underestimated. Tonight, she intended to let them choke on their own arrogance. As the string quartet played, waiters glided through the crowd with silver trays. Richard clinked his glass for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying over the music, "I'd like to introduce our special guest for the evening, our very own cleaning lady, Maria." The room erupted in cruel laughter. Phones rose into the air, recording her humiliation for social media. Maria felt the heat of 100 stares on her skin, but her expression didn't waver. In that moment, she saw exactly what they saw, someone they thought was powerless. Richard stepped closer, savoring the moment. "You must be overwhelmed," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "A place like this, it's not exactly your world, is it?" Maria tilted her head, her eyes never leaving his. "On the contrary," she replied softly. "This room feels familiar." Something in her tone made him falter just for a moment. But the smirk returned. "Well, let's hope you enjoy it while it lasts." If only he knew. Maria had come to that ballroom for more than an evening of forced smiles. She had come with proof. Proof that could destroy the very foundation of Richard Blackwood's glittering empire. And before the night was over, everyone in that room would know exactly who she really was. The laughter died when Maria reached into her clutch. She didn't pull out a phone or a drink ticket. She pulled out a ring. A vintage piece, gold and sapphire, engraved with the Blackwood crest. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "This," she said, her voice cutting clean through the silence, "belonged to my mother. It was given to her by Henry Blackwood, your father, Richard." A murmur swelled like a storm. Richard's smirk faltered. "You're lying." Maria took a step forward, her heels clicking against the marble like a gavel. "My mother wasn't just a piano teacher in your house. She was your father's partner, and I am his daughter. That makes me your half-sister." The crowd erupted, half in disbelief, half in fascination. Phones shot up to capture every word. "You think this is a stunt?" Maria continued. "I came with proof. financial records, birth certificates, and testimonies from people who knew your father's real will, the one you destroyed. Richard's face turned a dangerous shade of pale. "You're trying to ruin me," he hissed. "No," she said, her voice rising above the noise. "I'm showing them who you really are. A man who stole my inheritance, erased my existence, and treated me like the dirt beneath your shoes." The room was electric now, guests whispering, stepping back from him as if his disgrace were contagious. Maria's eyes locked on his. "Tonight was supposed to humiliate me, but instead, it will expose you." A reporter stepped forward from the crowd. "Miss Blackwood, is it true you filed a lawsuit?" Maria's smile was cold. "Not just a lawsuit, criminal charges." Gasps, murmurs, the sound of a door opening. Uniformed officers entered the ballroom. Richard's eyes darted to them, then back to her. "What have you done?" Maria didn't blink. "Justice, Richard. Something you've never believed in. Until now." The officers led Richard Blackwood through the ballroom in handcuffs. No one laughed now. The same people who had smirked at Maria hours earlier avoided her gaze, their champagne flutes trembling in their hands. Outside, the flash of cameras turned night into day. Reporters shouted questions, hungry for every detail of the scandal that had just detonated in California high society. But Maria wasn't looking for headlines. She was looking for something she had been denied her whole life: acknowledgement. For years, she had been treated like she didn't exist, as if her history and her worth were invisible because of her skin, her job, her silence. Tonight, she made herself undeniable. In the days that followed, news outlets across the country told her story. Some called it the fall of a billionaire. Others called it a triumph over prejudice. Maria didn't care for the labels. She knew the truth. The humiliation Richard had planned for her was nothing compared to the decades of humiliation inflicted on people like her in boardrooms, classrooms, and neighborhoods where they were told they didn't belong. And while her personal victory was complete, the fight was far from over. Because for every Richard Blackwood exposed, there were 100 more hiding behind money, influence, and polite smiles. Maria stood on the balcony of her new home weeks later watching the city lights. Justice had been served for her. But she couldn't stop thinking about those still living in silence, still waiting for their moment to be heard. Maybe the real question wasn't how she won. Maybe it was, when will we stop making people fight this hard just to be seen as equal?